Welcome, everybody, to School Psych Podcast. I'm Rachel. I'm a school psychologist working in the state of Maryland, and tonight we're going to be talking with our guest about social and emotional learning, so very excited. Typically, I would pass it over to my friend Rebecca, but we're having a little bit of technical difficulty, so we can't hear her. So she's muted. She's just going to be here to kind of support us and watch our social media feeds. But typically, she would be the one that tells us a little bit about how to participate tonight. There's a couple different ways. One, you can post on the Facebook page, and she'll be keeping an eye out on that. You can talk to us through Twitter with the hashtag #PsychedPodcast. And you can also talk to us right on Google Live there. There should be a chat box right next to the video feed that should be pretty easy to just post your questions and comments and everything there. So we definitely look forward to hearing from you. So I'm going to pass it over to Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a school psych working in New York State. We did a little poll on Facebook to get some feedback from our viewers and our school psychs out there across the nation on how they're involved in social emotional learning. And the results totally surprised me. I kind of expected that most of us would be a little too busy to be directly involved in it. But about four areas were voted higher than people who were not involved. So some of us don't have time to be involved or not directly involved in social emotional learning, but the vast majority of respondents are directly involved in social emotional learning, which is so great. We had 46 votes for people that create SEL content in social stories, books, lesson plans, or activities. 45 votes for people who work with small groups or at tier 2 to create and progress towards social emotional learning goals. 40 votes for people who often engage in professional development opportunities for social emotional learning theory and practice, and 30 votes for people who use theories and empirical evidence for SEL research to create counseling goals. Then we had 28 votes for people who were not involved in their building, which I can understand. You know, there's a lot going on in our roles, right? We also have some people who are involved in leadership roles with social emotional learning in their building and working with teachers and all these other things. So it's a big area for school psych, so it's a great topic for us to talk about. And I want to welcome our special guest, Kyle Carlin. Kyle is a school psychologist in the West Central Kansas Special Education Cooperative in Hays, Kansas. He's also the author of the book Bug and Boo, a book that helps teach kids about social emotional skills. He has experience working with Head Start classrooms, supporting social emotional development, and he has presented to children, parents, teachers, and administrators about social emotional learning. Kyle graduated from Fort Hays State University in 2011 with an EDS degree in school psych. He serves on the executive board of the Kansas Association of School Psychologists and is a past president and serves on multiple committees and works on groups related to social emotional development of children. He also spent 8 years in the U.S. Army Reserves, where he achieved the rank of sergeant and was deployed to Southwest Asia once, spending time in Kuwait, Iraq, and Qatar. He is married and has 2 children, Lauren and Evan. So Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
We really appreciate it. So how can we define social emotional learning from your perspective and based on your experience?
Social emotional learning is essentially how we go about learning things like empathy and developing our attitudes. Helps us understand what our emotions are and how to control them, how to interact with other people, how to read other people and their emotions and in our interactions, and then how to develop those relationships around them. And then it's also takes into account our responsible decision making. So how do our actions affect others, and how do our actions affect our progress towards our goals or towards other things we're trying to achieve.
So how did you get interested in this topic?
I got interested in this topic because when I was working in my previous employer, in addition to the special ed role that I had, I also had responsibilities in one of our local Head Start classrooms. That they had an AM and a PM classroom, and I was responsible for going in and providing social emotional lessons, but then also kind of being a consultant with the staff to help them, because the lessons are one thing, but then it's a matter of integrating it into the day and providing that feedback and modeling. And so I was there to kind of help support that kind of tier 1 level, that that this is what everybody's getting, but I was also there for those kids that were maybe needing a little bit extra support with that. things like, when you have 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, you have a lot of kids that, at that age, they're still learning that. They're still very much in development of those skills, and some kids need a little bit more modeling or a little bit more practice than others. So I've kind of helped staff figure out how to give those kids that practice.
And in school age, what is your experience, or about implementing that in school age? What are your thoughts about that?
My main experience is kind of tied around PBIS, which PBIS is mostly the behavior, and I do separate the behavior side of things and the social side of things. I always think of behavior as kind of like, if you think about it from a math perspective, like your math facts, those are very kind of a rote process. It's a very 2 + 2 is 4, and if you present it, it's always going to be presented in a very similar way. And if a child's able to get an answer, then that shows good competency of that skill. And I think that is like our behavior in PBIS. Whereas I think of the social emotional skills as more of like your math problem solving or your number sense type things. The things that more of that internal of, does this really make sense? Do I really understand what I'm doing with the behavior? You can teach a kid that when they are at rug that they're supposed to sit, but if they understand why, they're going to be more likely to generalize that into other settings. And so, so most of my experience in the schools has been, with school age kids, has been tied around like that PBIS concept, where while giving teachers feedback on how to integrate that more and make it more of helping them tie the behavior to the reason why the behavior should be there. So, if that makes sense. So.
It does. Rachel, we can't hear you.
Oh.
Sorry, so I'm just going to keep talking, okay? As far as social emotional learning, evaluation, do you think there's an evaluation component before you start this, or do you think it's more of like a global PBIS, let's implement it to the whole school or whatever?
Well, just as with any whether it's social, behavior, or academics, I feel like there is definitely a tier 1 component, but without a screening component, I think you're going to have a hard time figuring out who needs what, and because you're going to end up with a lot of the kids that have externalizing behaviors being identified, whereas you've got a lot of internalizers that need some support with their social emotional skills as well. If they're drawing back, if they're not participating in recess, if they're less engaged in school, they still have a need that needs to be addressed. And without screening tools that look into both the external and the internal factors, I think you risk missing them. But certainly anything that we do in schools, we need to have an evaluation component to it to make sure it's worth our, the time we're putting towards it is working. I don't know about you, but I have pretty limited time in my schools, and I'm pretty busy, as I think most of us are. I think for everything, if we don't have something telling us that, hey, what we're doing is working, then we risk wasting, for lack of a better word, wasting time towards an effort that isn't really working. So definitely an evaluation. When I was in the Head Start program, working with the Head Start, they did the ASQSE, I can't remember what it stands for now, but Ages and Stages questionnaire, social emotional, and they did it every quarter. They'd go parent, teacher, and then from that we had decision points on what kind of supports we were going to provide for these kids. And then I went in once a week, and every time that I was in there, I would rate students, all the students in there, on 5 behaviors, or 5 broad abilities, things like following directions, getting along with others, interacting appropriately with children, interacting appropriately with adults, some of those basic things that we were really trying to target. And so those kind of things were, we had to have that evaluation component to show that it was being effective. In the schools, it's a little bit more difficult because of if your school doesn't have a social screener, then it's hard to implement one on your own. But there are certainly tools out there that can be helpful. Even some of the tools that are often used at PBIS, like the SRSS has an internalizing and externalizing component to it, and so the newer one does. And so you can use some of that information to help identify, and then use different progress monitoring tools, that whether that's a rubric you create yourself or something that you can find online, or through other means that can be helpful in showing you that, hey, this is working. Even with counseling, even if you just use something like having the student rate how they've been doing, or how they feel they've been doing with certain skills you're working on, rating them on a 0 to 10, or a line, and then draw a slash on it, and that can be kind of a way to operationalize it, to kind of give you that sense of, is this working, is it not? Again, whether you're working with individual kids or looking at it from a whole class, I think you need to have some way of measuring what you're trying to impact. Otherwise, it's hard to tell if it's working.
So data and screening and implementing. So we got, I think.
Oh, I just lost you.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I have Rachel now.
Okay, wait. Sorry. I think something happened on my end.
I realized I didn't plug my computer in. I'm going to plug it in real quick.
And unmute yourself.
Okay, yeah, it's okay. I got hidden.
Sorry, that was my fault.
No, yeah, thanks, Rach.
Excuse me.
So,
sorry.
Oh no, all good. So I'm kind of curious about like tier 3, because that's where I work, and I work in special education with kids who are getting a lot of services. I do like a weekly social skills kind of group in the classes that I work in, and also a lot of pull-out services. So social emotional learning in tier 3. Would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, mostly, and what ends up being in PBIS tiered models is often, what you're trying to build that internalizing factor of the behavior. You're trying to make them see why the behavior matters. And so when you're oftentimes in tier 2, you're doing, maybe some small group things with 2 or 3 kids for maybe a month or a short time, targeting those skills. And then in tier 3, you probably have a behavior plan in place that's targeting specific behaviors. And then your social skills that you're meeting with them on once a week probably relates to that. So you're trying to develop that, get that environment and the reinforcement schedule in a way that promotes that behavior in kind of a rote way. But then with your social emotional lessons, you're trying to target that more from trying to get to where they can maybe understand the empathy of how their actions impact others, how that behavior, trying to generalize that a little bit more. What it ends up looking like, at least in my experiences, has mostly been just through individual counseling, or we have a school social worker that's often who is the person who provides that counseling. I'm lucky in my position to be able to provide it to 2 or 3 kids at any given time. Just my schedule doesn't allow me to do as much as I'd like, but those kids who particularly are needing a strong male role model, oftentimes I get pulled in to work with them. And anything you're doing one-on-one with a student is probably, you always get into that hashing out, is it tier 1 or is it tier 2 or tier 3, and everybody's kind of goes back and forth on what it is. In my mind, a one-on-one is tier 3 just because of the intensity of it. And so, but with the social emotional skills, you can find different programs out there that help. One of the things I started using, that you had Stephen Shaw on, I think a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about he had that nine lesson social emotional or self-regulation lesson plans, and I've taken those and I've started using them a little bit more, trying to be more deliberate in my actions when I'm meeting with students, because making sure that what I'm doing is evident, because I found that over time I'll tend to drift into more of a kind of where I'm kind of checking in with the kid, and then it ends up being more of a conversation as opposed to really, of course we'll be talking about the things that they're working on, their goals, but I often lose my own focus on it. And that's one thing why you have to have the evaluation. You have to have a goal, even if it's gen ed. You need to have a goal of, what am I trying to achieve? How do I know when I'm done with this? How do we know that the student's ready to not need this anymore? because without it, you could do it forever. You could just meet with the kid every week or every 2 weeks and just keep checking in and, hey, how's everything going? Oh, everything's fine. Okay, great. Go back to class. But that's great for the relationship. That's great for them to be able to have a connection. But am I really doing anything from a social, emotional, or mental health need at that point? I mean, in a way that my time, again, our time is very valuable as school psychs. We're very busy. I want to make sure that is there another student that I could be being more. If this kid is only needing just somebody to stop and check in, I can still do that without it being this formal setting. I can just stick my head in the door and say, hey, how's everything going? And a 1 or 2 minute thing. But if that time could be going to another student that maybe is needing something more deliberate, then it should be doing that. And again, the conversation you had with Dr. Shaw, it really helped me to kind of refocus on, oh yeah, hey, I've been kind of drifting away with this one particular kid. I need to be a little bit more deliberate. So.
It's nice to hear that. Sorry, Rachel, we can't hear you again. It's great to hear that reviewing the podcast helps you kind of check in on yourself. I feel like it does that for us too. Do you know Rebecca typed in a comment about curriculum? We are all about the free content here on Psych Podcast. Is there any curriculum, free or not, that you've heard about?
The one I'm most familiar with is Second Steps. Rebecca just typed in the side.
Yeah.
That's the one that we used in our preschool, and I really liked how it was set up. It for classroom teachers and aides that they don't have as much of the training in the background, and they're busy. They don't have time to go try and figure out how do I do all this. Second Step, having it all kind of laid out. They have, at least for the preschool, it came out in one card per week, this big card that was about this big or so, and it had 5 different lessons on it. One you did the first day, second day, third day. And what I would do is I would come in, the first 2 years I was in the program, I would come in and do the main lesson, and then they would do the supplemental things, and which was great. But the third year, and what really found to be even more effective was having them do the lesson and then me come in and supplement later, because then they took more ownership on it. They were able to, they throughout the week, they were integrating it into their activities more. And so again, Second Step I really like because it fit very well with the Castle model of self-regulation, self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. And it was broken down into small segments. There were songs, there were puppets. I personally am not real comfortable doing puppets, but you don't have to be good with the puppets. The kids still enjoy it and still like it, and you can, that's the one thing I like about working with preschoolers is you can be as silly as you want and they won't say anything about it. They think that's just great, and it allows you to, if I was doing it with 8th graders, I might be a little different, but with it was certainly nice. But again, Second Step, I really like how it lined out especially for that busy teacher that's wanting to know, okay, what can I do today with a script and with everything. And I actually kind of based some of that scripting into Bug and Boo into a section in the back, which we'll talk about later. But I've taken a lot of those pieces and realized, for those people that are at the ground floor with these kids, of who's there every day with them, giving them the tools in a way that they can use. It's not just hey, here's a big idea. It's all about giving them specific things they can do that are actionable and that they know that they can be successful with. Because if they feel like they're going to mess it up, or they feel like they're going to embarrass themselves, they're less likely to do it. So if we can give them the tools to help build that capacity, I think it's key. And the Second Step does that by outlining it so well. I'm not familiar with any other boxed curriculums out there. There's some, of course, some around more of the PBIS type stuff, like Howie Knopf from Arkansas. He has stop and think program, which is more of PBIS, but it kind of integrates some of that thought behind the behaviors. That one's not, I went to a training where he talked about it. I haven't seen it in action, but so I'd be interested to see kind of if anybody's used that and what kind of information they would have about it. But really, right now in my own school, or my current schools, there really isn't. We don't have a social emotional curriculum that I'm aware of, and so the only one I'm aware of is, or the only one I'm familiar with is Second Steps.
All right, do I have audio? Am I good? Okay. I did want to backtrack a little bit. I had a thought just when you're talking about, having a goal when you're meeting with students. I do see a couple kids for counseling, and I do find myself in that kind of trap where things have been hectic and maybe I haven't planned out a specific lesson, and then it's just like, okay, come on into my office, and how are things going, and I don't have a plan. And I think it's good to, like you said, to touch base and have that connection, but at the end of that, I always feel like, like I didn't do the service that it needed to be done. So totally understand.
I hearing you talk about it did make me think. There's a book, Self-Regulation. Self-Regulation. I can't think of the name of it now. It's by Brad Chapin, Chapin. He went to grad school where I went to grad school a few years before me, and he came back and talked about this program, and he ended up writing a book with all these broken down lessons. I actually ended up using some of that to develop my own little 9 or 10 week curriculum as part of our PBIS efforts in one of my schools, where I pulled some of those lessons, things like helping kids understand the behavior or the feelings that or the ways that their body changes when they get upset, giving them ways to calm down, giving them ways to develop that empathy. I can't remember the name of his book real quick. Let me see. But that one, I've taken a lot of my lessons that I end up doing, especially things that have that kid that just drops in. I'll kind of take some time and do one of those lessons that I'm more familiar with that maybe seems to fit with what that kid is needing at that point. So
very cool. I think we might have Rebecca having.
Can you hear me?
Yay!
Yes, that was killing me. Can I just tell you? I'm so sorry. I missed so much of what you were saying now, but I was just dying to talk. So this is better. So I can also see your comments, audience out there. So I'm hoping you guys have the video open and you can check for comments along the YouTube video. But if I can jump in, I think you were just talking about, Kyle, different curricula that you have used in different ways. And I know you were talking about Second Steps. I'm wondering, are you in charge in your building? Are you one of the people, like some of us in the poll, that is responsible for helping teachers or your school decide on where the social emotional learning lesson plans come from different sources in different rooms or programs?
in my current role, I am not.
Oh.
Where I was before, when I was working at the Head Start, I did help. Well, I didn't really pick the curriculum, but I did help kind of me and the teachers and the aides. We talked about how we felt like the curriculum how we felt like the curriculum was going and what we felt would maybe give it a boost. And that was where we kind of flip-flopped our roles, where I came in and doing the supplements while they did the primary.
Okay.
And that helped. But really, in a decision-making capacity, I haven't had that.
I find that so interesting because it is such an opportunity, I think, for us as school psychologists to take leadership in our buildings. And I think that you by just choosing Second Steps and pushing it into classrooms, in some ways you are doing that as well. But I think that in terms of connecting to PBIS and looking for programs that will benefit other class grades and teachers and assemblies and things, we have such an opportunity as school psychologists to look at research and determine what fits our needs or our learning objectives. And to that end, I wanted to say posted a couple of, or at least one, I'm going to try to post the other, resources for looking at different evidence-based social emotional learning curriculums through Castle. They have a great library of curricula that they explore, and also Edutopia. I posted those links on the School Psych podcast page on Facebook.
And Cephal, which is kind of like a sister to Castle, or it's I guess it's not really a sister. It's one of the focus on social emotional development in early childhood, but a lot of the materials on there, they've got some really good social stories. There's Tucker the Turtle teaching kids how to a way to calm down. We're tucking your shoulders in, taking a couple breaths.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the turtle.
Oh yeah.
So, but they've got a lot of things for parents, for teachers, that you can share. Some prepackaged modules that you can, as the teacher can provide as training to parents to help develop these things. And a lot of it, while it's targeted at that that preschool age, a lot of it would still make a lot of sense and be relevant for kindergarten through about second grade, I would think.
That's awesome.
And so,
what is that? I'm going to try to post that in comments as well. Can you say
the cephal.vanderbilt.edu, I believe.
Oh yes. Okay.
CSEFEL.
Yeah, that's a great one that people should check out. Lots of free resources on there too, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, everything.
I wanted to ask you.
Sorry.
You and I briefly spoke in comments about state standards, learning objectives and standards. I know the state of Illinois has been really generous about publishing those, and you mentioned your state has you've been involved in creating some of those standards as well in your state. Are yours published also? Are they available for other people to check out?
Yes, actually, if you search KSDE, Kansas State Department of Education, and the SECD standards, it has a ton of information there on the standards. They've got some sample outcome measure rubrics that you can use. The person or one of the people that was on the board that kind of helped, or the group that helped develop them, is here in the same town I am, and I've been able to get some information from her where they made some different rubrics and stuff to be used. And I actually shared those with my school social worker for her to use with some of her goals and things going forward, because she was trying to find ways to measure what she was working on, and there's just not a lot of great tools out there that are cost effective, and so she was able to find something that worked. One gave her a baseline by having teachers rate them on these particular skills that she was wanting to work on, and then being able to do that every 9 weeks and say, hey, if the student is making progress or not, and in a way that is relevant and tied to something more than just, hey, it got better, but really, is this where he should be or where she should be? So, but yeah,
so helpful.
Yes, Kansas is one of only 3.
I find that so helpful because I've used the state of Illinois standards and learning objectives in working with teachers in my building, and it's so helpful to know what social emotional learning objective you have, to pick out a lesson plan for it, and then assess in your own way in your own classroom or lesson or activity if you've met that goal. So it's such a great way to structure if you're just getting started, or if you're not sure where you want to go, what kinds of lessons or goals that you should have, to just look at those standards, because at least the ones from the state of Illinois go kindergarten, I believe, through 12th grade. So at every level, there's a large standard, and underneath it are several discrete learning objectives. It's really super helpful. If some of you haven't checked it out, I recommend checking it out.
That is very much like Kansas. I think they did theirs just after Illinois, I believe, and I think it was large. And there's a lot of similarities between them, and they all seem to kind of tie off of the Castle standard. In Kansas, in particular, they put the self ones together and the social ones together. So self-awareness and self-regulate or self-management. are put together into one broad category, and then there's, it's broken down across into smaller standards. And then same with the social awareness and the relationship skills. They were put together into a social piece. So.
Really cool.
And they call the responsible decision making, they call it character, which of course, it works.
Right. Really interesting. I happen to be able to teach a character education class to 6th grade. So once a week I go in and I follow the CASTLE structure of self-awareness, self-management, intra and interpersonal skills. But under each major heading, I have little discrete lessons appropriate for 6th grade. And so we do a lot of really fun stuff. We talked about grit and Angela Duckworth's research in grit this year, and under both self-awareness and self-management. So I take a character education sort of topic and I break it down along the CASTLE guidelines. And then I use a curriculum called the 180 Degrees curriculum, and shout out to 180 Degrees people out in California. It's a nice little curriculum, and it goes through the grades as well, K through 12, different workbooks, and based on CASTLE. It's just really fun stuff. I'm so enthusiastic. I don't mean to, now that I can speak, I don't mean to take over, but I can't help it.
I always like to hear that news. I took note about the 180 Degrees curriculum.
Yeah, and Dean, who is the CEO of the foundation, is so wonderful. So call him up and ask him questions. He's really helpful. He has different in-service programs in different states, and different schools across the country are using it. And it's nice to have. It's a nice sort of small company that takes care of its teachers and school psych. So I recommend it. And sorry about that. I shouldn't be plugging things because I have just full disclosure, I have no vested interest in 180 Degrees, but I like the curriculum. And so I also wanted to ask you, and we all did, about, I don't know if I missed it, but we were talking about Bug and Boo a little bit, I think. Can you tell us about that process? Because I bet many of us have great ideas for social stories or social emotional learning stories that could be books, but it's hard to figure out where to start. If you have an idea for a book, where do you go from there? Do you just sketch it up, and then who do you talk to? I know you had an interesting process. You started by self-publication, right?
Kind of. I'm actually through a small publisher, a local publisher who works with veteran authors. I was actually in the military with him. He wrote his own children's book, started his own publishing company. So I'll take a step back just a little bit, because that's a little ways into the story. But how I first, of course, like you say, all of us, or many of us, have thoughts of, oh, this would be a great idea that I'd want to write about, or I'd like to go into a book. Just didn't really know where to start. And so I'd been interested for a while, and then I happened to go to, this was back, I started the process of writing it not last May, but the May before that. But before that, even, I, for 2 years after grad school, I was like, well, what do I want to do with the path that I've chosen with this career? Of course, I love working in the schools, but I always felt like there was something more I could be doing. And gotten the idea of, well, maybe writing a book or those kind of things. And it was an idea that kind of bounced around in my head, but I never taken any concrete action on. And then I went to I got elected as the NASP president, or the CAST president, and got to go to a NASP leadership training. And there I met somebody who had published her own children's book, and it got me really excited. Sarah Howe. We were there at supper, and we were just kind of talking a little bit about the process and everything. And I got to thinking, if she was able to do this, and then, this is something that it's not as, I think I could do it too. And but then it was a matter, okay, so now I'm thinking more that this could be something real, but what do I write about? And I always like my kids, I always felt their nicknames are Bug and Boo, from They're infants. It's just what they are. My daughter is Boo, and from when she was really little, she'd stick her little Boo lip out, and it just kind of always that stuck. And then Bug, it went from Booger to Bug to Love Bug, like just or Puddle Bug, Hug Bug, just all those kind of things. So, but I thought that Bug and Boo sounded really nice. It works good for character names. I thought that was kind of cute. But I was, even at that point, I was kind of like, using my kids' nicknames, is that kind of exploitative, or is it those kind of things? After talking with some people in my family, they felt like, no, it'd be appropriate to do so. And so after school got out in May 2015, I went and just sat down and wrote my first kind of draft of what is now Bug and Boo. And I was like, okay. Over the summer, I worked on drafting it and looking at. I contacted Sarah Howe again to find out how did she go about publishing. I contacted Seth Castle, who had just written somebody I'd been in the military with, who I had just written his own children's book on teaching kids about PTSD for veterans who are coming back home, to the kids who have. It's Why Is Dad So Mad? And he ended up writing it on Why Is Mom So Mad for mothers in the military. Great books that I encourage everybody to get them. But I contacted him, and he said in our conversation, he mentioned something about starting his own publishing company, and he'd be interested in working with, or he was wanting to work with veterans with a message. And so I kind of let that sit for a little bit, a couple of weeks. Ended up going back to him and saying, hey, if you're really interested, I'd really like to get this going, try and figure out what to do. And so he had used Kickstarter to fund his book, and so I went ahead and kind of followed his model, went through that process to be able to pay for the illustrations and the book design. In the meantime, he connected me with his book designer, who helped me take the thoughts that were up here and turn it into the pictures and everything, like an actual flow of a book and the design of a book. And the illustrator took my thoughts and put it into real, made it real. And the Kickstarter was successful. We were able to fund it and get it off the ground, and then the rest was kind of history. But it was all a process that really wouldn't have started it, or at least wouldn't have started when it did, if it hadn't been for conversations at just the right times to help me figure out what the next step would be. So.
That's so cool. We love when psychs kind of get out of their offices, so to speak, and start to do some of this really good work. So we're excited. Can you tell us, maybe it was when I was kind of in and out of the Hangout, but can you tell us kind of a synopsis, or what specifically the book is, who that's targeted for, and what this kind of storyline is?
And yeah, this is Bug and Boo. It was targeted, it's written, on my end, it looks like it's backwards. Is it backwards on yours?
No.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Oh, excuse me, I apologize. The Bug and Boo, it's about a brother and sister who love each other very much, but they have a conflict. In this case, Boo is drawing a picture, and Bug runs in and grabs a crayon like little brothers do and just scribbles all over it. And then Boo becomes very upset and yells and scares Bug, and he runs to his room, and then Boo realizes that she did something that she really didn't mean to, and it hurt her brother's feelings, and so she goes through belly breathing to calm down, and then goes and fixes the situation with her brother. And by happenstance, if you break down the castle, the 5 domains of castle, each one is in the book. It's just a matter of the target is helping kids calm down. But you could use this book to really hit on any of the 5 domains, just depending on what you wanted to focus on as you're reading it. And so I'll try and get a decent shot here. My illustrator was Carissa Othon Gonzalez. I feel she did an excellent job, even in the details of the book. It was only on like the second or third concept drawing, or the version of the drawings, that I recognized that on the shirts of the characters, he made them personalized with a ghost for Boo, and bugs on there for bug, things like that.
Mhm.
Which, so there's, of course, the introduction of the characters. And the thing is, the stuff in here is all true to my kids. Like, it says, who is a girl who knows what she likes? She likes the color blue, cheese pizza, and learning at school. Those are all things she enjoys very. And then it, of course, the introduction of bug, then the process of going through, and here where she gets upset, scares mom, and then, and I wanted it to be showing the child that you're reading it to that you can manage it yourself. And so instead of a parent coming and saving the day and guiding her through it, it was her remembering that her parents had talked about it, and then self-initiating the belly breathing, which these are of course, the core. This was the main focus of the book, was the concept of belly breathing and how to calm down. And one thing, my kids get the Dolly Parton Imagination Library books, and in each book it has things to do before you read the book, as you're reading, and after. And when I was working in Head Start, I recognized working with parents that there were a lot of parents that wanted to do things. They recognized that they needed to do things at home with their children to help develop their social and emotional skills, but they often didn't know what to do. And so with that, I wanted to set out with this book. It was one to have the cute story that helped engage the kids, but then I also wanted to put in lessons for the parents or the caregivers, whether it's a grandparent or a teacher, to with that same model of things to do before, during, and after you read the book to promote those skills. And so the last 2 pages of the book are those skills, and it's going to be hard to read, but kind of breaks it down of what to do before, during, and after, and just gives them some ideas and a script. Like I said, I like the scripts from Second Step, and so I integrated scripts in that way here, where if you want to use this just as a guide and freeform your own, that's great. If you don't know what to say and you want to use the script, that's fine too. When you're working with little kids, they often don't care if you're reading a script because it's all about the interaction. It's all about sharing it. And I feel like those lessons and getting the parents engaged with it or the caregivers engaged with it is just as important as the kids.
Definitely.
That's really awesome, and I hope that your story and how you came to all that inspires maybe some other school psychs to do similar things, because I think we would all benefit from a lot more of these types of stories being available. It's really great.
Where's the story for sale? Is it on Amazon? Where are you selling it?
It's on Amazon. You can just search Bug and Boo and you'll find it there. I believe it's $9 there. And so it's available in ebook as well at it's $5 I think as an ebook. I should know this better, but it's cheaper if you get it as an ebook. But I'd say $9 paperback. So.
Very cool.
I'm going to viewer comment there. Eric says, what's great about this is so many of us start from scratch with SEL work. Sharing all of this keeps us from reinventing the wheel and finding research-based material. So
it's true. It's
awesome.
So true. I was just trying to look up the Illinois standards to clip the link, and I'm going to try to do that later. But for some reason, now when I click it, it says this page is not available, but it used to be available. So I will find out about that, and if I can share it on the School Psych podcast page, I definitely will.
Yeah. And Illinois is having some changes going through with some of their SEL regs, because they recently passed something saying that schools have to provide screening now for the social emotional learning, and I wonder if maybe they're updating their website with some of that information, or if it's just, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if that was what's going on.
Yeah, it used to be even a Word document that you could download and then edit, which is really wonderful. But I didn't see it in my Google search just now. But yeah.
Okay, any final questions? We're going to do kind of a final call for questions, I think, before we start to wrap things up. But really, really great and exciting stuff. And I know that, Rebecca, I could just tell that you were just dying, not being able to, because this is right up your alley.
Yeah, this is. And I feel like I blurted out everything I wanted to say in the first 20 minutes. So I'm sorry about that, everyone. But I love the positive, sort of the positive education position of the of social emotional learning, you know, like trying to teach these lessons and to try to get in front of problems that may arise, to try to help give kids tools to handle normal stress, or you know, teach them about growth mindset so that they don't develop anxiety in the future over you know, high stakes testing or anything like that. All of these social emotional lessons are so important for our kiddos, and I just think the more we can do of that, the better.
I agree with you 100%, Rachel, or excuse me, Rebecca. One thing that I feel is so important, there's been a stronger push for school mental health, and a lot more information shared about trauma and its effects on kids' development, particularly in their cognitive and their social emotional development, where we see delays in those areas more and more in communication as well. And I think we're seeing things like trauma-informed care, trauma-informed practices in the schools, and PBIS and those kind of things of really teaching teachers and staff to be more compassionate, show more empathy, and to model those things for the kids are key, and I think are what will ultimately be able to prevent a lot of those kids from getting into a crisis situation, because they feel safe, they feel that they're going to a place that's predictable and comfortable, and we know that they're going to be able to or they when they feel that way, then we don't see those other behaviors or those other things kind of bubble up to the surface, especially if we can catch it early on kids. You know, trauma just has such a large impact, and if we're going to be trying to focus on school mental health, you know, there's always going to be that need for the intervention and the reactive component, but we have to be proactive in preventing it, but the way we prevent it is by teaching kids how to deal with stress, and giving kids their coping skills from an early age, helping them understand how their behaviors impact others, and ultimately, if we can do that, start developing that from preschool on, we're going to have a lot better chance at reducing some of those needs. I mean, I don't know about in your areas, but in our area, in where I'm at, more and more of our kids are coming into kindergarten without the ability to regulate their behaviors and their emotions, without being able to interact with their peers in a meaningful way or in an appropriate way, and it affects things, going forward.
Sure.
One thing I hope with Bug and Boo is be able to give caregivers those skills before that point, but in our schools, I feel we have a responsibility, and ultimately if we don't address it, we have a responsibility to address it. If we don't, it's going to affect everything from their academics to their lifelong outcomes. So
that's such a great point, I think, to wrap up on, and it reminds me quickly of a podcast we had a while back on suicide prevention, and luckily, suicide is such a low base rate thing, but what we discovered by talking to people and doing our research for that podcast was that education around coping tools and recognizing signs and symptoms of depression is the best kind of prevention. And I remember from that podcast that we talked about a new curriculum, which is called DBT Skills in Schools. And I believe it was Drs. Mazza and some others, that a husband and wife team, Dr. Mazza. But it just sounds like a great universal level one coping skills curriculum for kids. So I just wanted to mention that. But I completely agree with you, Kyle. It's really important stuff, giving kids tools to prevent what we don't want to have them suffer.
Kyle, any plans for a Bug and Boo series or a second book or anything?
My dream is for it to become a series. That depends on book sales. So if everybody goes out and buys, 10 or 20, that'd be great. So I've been fortunate to have a couple larger orders. I've had a couple head starts in the area buy them to be able to share with their multiple classrooms and then parents in those classrooms. I've also, one thing that's good, there's I don't know if you guys are familiar with like box programs like Stitch Fix or Loot Crate or those kind of things. It's kind of like a themed box each month that comes. I found out recently about it's called Curly's. What is it? Curly Clues Club. Curly's Club. That focuses on child development, and they recently purchased some books, some Bug and Boo books, and will be included in a social emotional development box. I believe it's going to be in April. So Curly's Clue Club, if you want to try that, you'll get a box full of other things as well as Bug and Boo.
Really cool. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, despite all the technical difficulties and whatnot. And thanks to Rebecca, too, for hanging in there, actually off on vacation and still dedicated enough to tonight. So we appreciate all of this. All right. Night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you for having me.